Ever wondered whether the ketchup you buy is the best tasting one out there? Welcome to the Taste Test channel, and this week we'll be taking an impartial look at popular tomato ketchup from around the world to discover what the differences are and how some of the best-selling varieties around the globe differ in taste. As always, just for fun, we'll be awarding our Taste Test channel Best in Class award to the winner. If you're new to the channel, just hit the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss out on any of our regular taste tests. So open the cupboard or fridge of billions of homes right across the globe and sure enough you'll find this stuff. In fact, it's in a whopping 97% of American fridges. Canada and Finland eat the most per person, and over 2 million people in the UK admit to eating it daily. Particularly kids, no doubt, who use it to annihilate the flavour of any meal their parents may have lovingly slaved over for hours at home. But it wasn't always tomato-based. Over 2,000 years ago, the Chinese were eating fermented fish sauce called ketchup or ketchup, which spread to the West from the 1600s and evolved into spicy, salty concoctions made from mushrooms, oysters, anchovies, walnuts, even plums and elderberries. Known for the longest time as catsup or catsup, it wasn't until 1812 that the first tomato-based recipe appeared, but the modern-day tomato vinegar and sugar versions we know and love really have to be credited to Mr. Heinz in 1876, but more on that shortly. So our lineup of popular tomato ketchups from around the world this week is as follows. The original one and only international bestseller, Heinz. Germany's top-selling ketchup brand, Verda. America's alternative favourite, Hunt's. From Down Under, a popular Aussie choice, Masterfoods. An Italian ketchup option, Mr. Organic. And finally, from Eastern Europe, the Polish favourite, Pudliszki. Price-wise, these were all fairly easy to get hold of, either online or in the world food section of supermarkets, and they all fall into a fairly affordable price group, although the cost to get hold of them may of course differ depending on where you're based. The amount in each bottle varies slightly, but you can see the price that I paid for each of them is shown below. As you can see, the Aussie Masterfoods was the most expensive, followed by Hunt's from the US, no doubt due to import costs. Polish Pudliszki was the cheapest by some margin, followed by the German and Italian brands. Nutritional wise, there is quite a bit of variation, so here are the 4 key groups we always stick to on the Taste Test channel, which are energy, fat, sugar and salt. The chart below lists the brands from top to bottom in energy content per 100 grams. As you can see, Pudliszki from Poland has the most energy, 25% more in fact than its nearest rivals, and Mr. Organic from Italy has the least, closely followed by Verda of Germany. Fat content is fairly negligible on all of them, less than 1%. Sugar, however, varies greatly, with Pudliszki again having the most, followed by Masterfoods and Heinz. In fact, it has twice as much sugar as Mr. Organic, which contains the least, followed by Hunt's from the US. Finally, salt content also differs, with Pudliszki having the most by some margin, and Heinz and the German brand Verda having joint least. But how will all this affect the taste? Well, that's why we're here. So we're going to start, fittingly, with the world's most popular ketchup, Heinz. Tomato ketchup in the 1800s contained pulp, spices and maybe brandy, but little or no vinegar or sugar, so preserving was an issue and it was often mouldy. This led to additives and harmful coal tar preservatives being used. Enter Pittsburgh entrepreneur Henry Heinz in 1876, who, using riper tomatoes with higher naturally preserving pectin levels and plenty of vinegar, removed the need for artificial preservatives, and all in novel glass bottles so you could see what you were getting. It was a roaring success, and within 30 years he was producing 13 million bottles a year. Today it sells 50 times that much across 200 countries. This has 148 grams of tomatoes per 100 grams of product, meaning the toms are reduced to intensify flavour. This is the UK version, by the way, so do bear in mind that the recipe can vary depending on which country you buy it in. So what we're going to do is open all the bottles first so we can compare them visually side by side, and then we'll move on to the tasting. So let's serve some out. Okay, so very smooth, homogenised and glossy, but still with thickness to it. There's a strong vinegary aroma, not at all savoury, so no onion or garlic tones, but a sweet smell with cloves or allspice notes. And I'll look forward to tasting it after we've opened the others. Next, Germany's leading ketchup brand, Werder. Founded in the town of the same name in 1873, it was one of many companies taken under state ownership after the Second World War, then given back to the previous owners in the 1990s, who promptly sold it. Now under the banner Werder Feinkost, meaning delicatessen, their website proudly reveals that in 3 separate years, certain German tests rated this ketchup as good. which, it's hard to know, in the no-nonsense language of the Germans, could mean anything from sufficiently average to pretty damn amazing. So we'll have to see. Tomato content on this one is 83% from paste. So let's serve some out. Okay, some patience and persistence required here, but all part of the traditional fun of ketchup. So much more texture and grain evident in this one, not smooth and glossy like Heinz, but that's not a bad thing. There's a sweet and vinegary aroma again, but less spicy tones. Maybe a hint of seasoning, but very subtle. It looks and smells more of tomatoes, but we'll have to see just how tomatoey it is in the tasting section. Next, the second biggest selling ketchup in America, Heinz. Heinz taking the #1 spot. Heinz was founded as a packing company in 1888 by two brothers making the most of California's booming fruit and veg industry. By the 1940s, they were shipping 1 million cans of goods per year, and today, owned by Conagra Foods, they're one of the biggest global tomato processors. By the way, their version of this was still called ketchup right up until 1988. I should point out that their standard recipe contains high fructose corn syrup, but this is their 100% natural version, giving us a like-for-like comparison with the other brands in this test. It's made with all Californian vine-ripened tomatoes, but the percentage isn't stated. So we'll serve some out. So again, thicker and more texture evident, not as much as Verda, but more so than Heinz. There's a very different aroma to this one, no obvious spice or onion, but rich, deeper notes, like malt vinegar and molasses. Very interesting. Next, from down under, Masterfoods, one of Australia's favourites, and you'll notice straight away this says tomato sauce, which is what the Aussies call their ketchup, but both terms are used interchangeably. Masterfoods was founded down under in 1945, initially as a food importer, with the first food they produced being bread and butter cucumbers, which apparently are just gherkins or pickles you can put in a sandwich. Other unusual items were kangaroo tail soup, served by Qantas Airways in the 60s, poor old Skippy, and a range of their own cookbooks. Owned by Masterfoods Australia since '67, this contains 77% tomatoes from paste. So let's serve some out. Okay, so much thinner, that squirted out very easily. Quite a dark vinegary look to it, but with less punch in the aroma and no obvious tomato. More savoury and all, but very subtle. And we'll see how it tastes shortly. Next, from Italy, Mr. Organic. The company started in 2009, stemming from 3 generations of Italian tomato producers and developed by friends who felt that organic agriculture means better taste, health and environment. Their market's mostly UK-based, although expanding, but all their tomatoes are grown on their own farm in Italy. Their entire range is plant-based and happily palm oil-free, and their ketchup contains 80% tomatoes. So we'll serve some out. So the glass bottle slows it down, but it flowed out smoothly once it got going, so not as thick as the German Verda, but similar in textured graininess. The smell is very different again, very deep and tomatoey, with an earthy fullness, like the aroma of a rich brown stock, plus added fruity notes. I'm keen to try it. Finally, the best-selling ketchup in Poland, and also one of the country's favourite food brands, Pudliszki. Founded in the mid-1800s as a sugar refinery, it wasn't until the 1920s they moved into tomatoes, after sending 2 professors to London to study the technology of ketchup production, would you believe? The strategy worked though, and today Pudliszki is pretty much a synonym for ketchup in Poland, also selling in the US, the UK and even China. Interestingly, Heinz have owned the biggest share in the company since 1997, but the recipes are totally different. This one has tomato puree content at just 62%. So let's serve some out. So quite gloopy and jellyish. There's a distinctly different smell, sweet and high-pitched, but in all, much less aroma than the others. It seems to be locked away in the starchiness. But we'll see how it actually tastes in just a moment. So looking at them all side by side, you can see there's a surprising amount of variation. Australian Masterfoods is the darkest, followed by the USA Heinz, with Pudliszki from Poland being the lightest, almost raspberry pink in colour, and the others having shades somewhere in between. Italian Mr. Organic and German Verda have the most texture, with a porridgey, grainy thickness, which is also there but less obvious in the USA Heinz. Masterfoods is also the thinnest and quickest to split or seep vinegar at the edges, while Heinz and Pudliszki are the smoothest and glossiest, holding their shape the longest. By the way, all of these, including Heinz, eventually split to some degree, except for Pudliszki, which looked like you could come back in a year and find it as the same thick blob. So I checked, and it is in fact the only one containing added starch. So with all that in mind, I'm really curious to discover just how much they vary in taste. Now, I'm not a massive ketchup eater, but like many people, I do think there's a place for it on French fries. So we'll rustle some up, and let's move on to the tasting. So let's start with the world's favourite, Heinz. So a very smooth texture that dissolves quickly. It's thin, but it does have substance. The main flavour is sweet pickle vinegar with plenty of zing like a gherkin. The tomato doesn't really punch through though, but it's in the background, complementing the subtle spices, and the flavours work well as one. They don't stand out separately. It's very sweet, but does have enough sharpness to carry it off, with acidic sweetness being the aftertaste. Overall, well balanced. It would definitely cut through fatty foods with a tangy kick. Next, we'll try Verda from Germany. So very different from Heinz, a thicker and pastier texture and more earthy and natural flavours. The main taste is tomatoes, but the deeper tang of peeled plum ones. It's softer and less sweet than Heinz. The vinegar and sugar are there, but dialed down, with a low mustardy aftertaste. Overall, this would go well with meat or sausages, and you could certainly stomach more of it on its own, but it has less impact for a burger or hot dogs, etc. Next, we'll try Hunt's from America. So similar to the German one in consistency, but a unique flavour again. A sharp malt vinegar kick and a much richer taste, with a strong hit of warm mulled wine type spices. It's tomatoey both in feel and taste, though not as much as Verda. Less sweet, but sweet enough, and saltier tasting. Overall, this is a good mix of tang, warmth and tomatoes, full flavoured with an added spicy dimension. Next we'll try Masterfoods from Australia. So a very thin and liquid texture, the thinnest so far. Wow, this is invasively sweet, much too sweet for me, and not enough sharpness to balance it out. There's a sweet tomato soup background to it, but the flavour disappears quickly, just leaving a saccharine aftertaste. Essentially, if you took a few spoons of sweet pickle vinegar, added a touch of tomato soup, then filled the jar with sugar and left it, it might taste something like this, so no thanks. Next we'll try Mr. Organic Italian Ketchup. So it's thick and pureed and feels textural. And again, a completely different spectrum of flavours, much more savoury and the most tomatoey so far. Earthy and natural like the German, but more of condensed tomato puree than peeled plum, with a slight bitter aftertaste and more savoury than sweet. It's the most natural but the least ketchup-y so far. It may not have the oomph to cut through fatty foods, but it would certainly be the one I'd encourage kids who smother ketchup on everything to have, as it just tastes so much better for you. Finally, we'll try Pudliszki from Poland. Oh my god, where do I start? That is really quite revolting. It's pasty, starchy and gelatinous, but the sweetness is insane. It is so sweet it makes the Australian one seem savoury in comparison. There's a spicy mustard seed flavour in there, a bit of sweet vinegar taste, but the sugar is on steroids. I'm finding it very hard to stomach. Each to their own, of course, and it may be exaggerated when you try them back to back, but oh holy Jesus, that is quite the most disgusting thing I've tried in some time. Yuck. So several gargles of whiskey later, that covers how they all differ in taste, and now that we've tasted them all, as always, just for fun, we award our Taste Test channel winners and Best in Class award. Now 2 of these are easy to eliminate. Masterfoods of Australia and Pudliszki from Poland are, in my opinion, just liquid shots of sugar, one very much more than the other. But as for the rest, it's probably the most difficult and closest test I've done to date, as they all have different things going for them. I'm not a huge ketchup eater, so which would I eat the most of if I had to, and which would I try and get kids to eat? Definitely Mr. Organic from Italy or Verda from Germany. They're just so much more natural tasting. But which would I choose to dip my fries in or put in a burger? Heinz or Hunt's from the US, no question. So it kind of comes down to what is a ketchup meant to be, not which is my favourite. And as a condiment, surely it's there to cut through grease and fat, elevate bland foods, and add a piquant kick. So on that basis, and it's literally so close it could change in a month, but our top 3 winners this week are as follows. Winning 3rd place, Verda from Germany. Natural earthy flavours with tomato tang. I can appreciate why the Germans happily dip their sausages in it. Winning second place and only missing first by the narrowest of margins, Heinz from the USA. Rich, piquant and tomatoey with malted sharpness and warm spices to elevate the taste. It would work well with anything, and their mix of flavours is actually my personal favourite. But in first place this week in the popular ketchups from around the world, the Taste Test Channel Best in Class award goes narrowly to Heinz. Although I preferred Heinz flavour, I have to admit this achieves best what a ketchup is supposed to do. With its well-blended all-in-one zingy flavour, it cuts through burgers, rolls, hot dogs, it makes fries more exciting, and it best provides the piquant lift that's needed. So well done to Heinz. And as always, taste is subjective, and this is purely my point of view, but I hope it's provided some useful insights. And by the way, I really encourage anyone to try taste tests at home. It's a really fun thing to do with family or friends, and such an eye-opener when you try things back to back as to just how much brands vary and the differences in quality. Completely different than when you try something on its own or from week to week. So I've certainly enjoyed making this episode. Never eaten so much ketchup in my life. I really hope you've enjoyed watching it, and if you have, anyone supporting our new and growing channel makes a huge difference. So don't forget to like, share and of course subscribe to ensure you don't miss out on any of our regular taste tests. Meanwhile, thanks for watching, and I'll catch up with you next time.